Send a message from New York to London. It arrives before you can lift your finger from the screen. So where did it go? Maybe you picture a satellite bouncing your words across space. That would be elegant. It would also be mostly wrong. Your message probably left your phone, crossed a city, reached the coast, and fell into the Atlantic Ocean. Down there, in darkness, it entered a strand of glass about as thin as a human hair. Lasers flashed through that glass. Machines repeated the signal along the way, and a cable no wider than a garden hose carried your joke, your payment, your work file, and millions of other private moments across the sea. More than 99% of international data traffic moves through submarine cables, not just video calls, bank instructions, cloud backups, airline systems, factory orders, trading data, and the ordinary web all depend on them. The modern world does not float in a cloud. It runs through glass, buried in mud, guarded by steel, and surrounded by fish. Now put an anchor above that cable. Let it sink. Let it catch. Then imagine the ship keeps moving. The line pulls tight, the protective layers tear, and the light inside disappears. What happens to your message now? Does half the world go dark? Or does the internet quietly pretend nothing happened? To answer that, we have to follow the message, break the route in front of it, and watch every backup take over. Because the surprising part is not that these cables fail. They fail all the time. The surprising part is how much damage the network can hide, until it suddenly cannot. Your phone begins wirelessly, but wireless does not mean infrastructure free. The signal reaches a nearby tower or router. From there, it enters fiber on land, passes through network equipment, and heads toward a data center or a coastal landing station. That small building is the doorway between a national network and the ocean. Near the beach, the cable is heavily protected and often buried beneath the seabed. This is the dangerous neighborhood. Anchors, fishing gear, dredging, construction, and shifting sediment all share the same shallow water. Farther out, where people are less likely to drag metal across it, the cable can simply rest on the ocean floor. Inside are several optical fibers, wrapped in waterproofing, copper, and layers of steel. The copper is not there to carry your cat video. It powers repeaters placed along the route. Those machines refresh the optical signal so it can cross thousands of kilometers without arriving as a faint electronic whisper. But here is the first important correction. Your message does not own one private path. Networks constantly choose routes according to cost, capacity, policy, and congestion. Even before anything breaks, two messages sent seconds apart may cross different cables. The internet is less like a train track and more like traffic moving through a living map. That flexibility is why you can use the internet without knowing the name of a single cable. It is also why the first seconds after a break are so strange. The physical damage can be violent. The digital response is almost silent. The cable goes dark. Monitoring systems detect lost light and a sudden change in traffic. Routers stop treating that path as usable. New instructions spread through connected networks, and traffic begins moving around the wound. Your message may travel north, south, or through another landing station before it crosses the ocean. For many users, the only symptom is a slightly slower page. A video call may drop once and reconnect. A download may take longer. Then, things appear normal again. That is not because the cable repaired itself. It is because spare capacity on other routes absorbed the load. One broken cable usually does not equal an internet blackout. That myth makes the system sound more fragile than it is. But the opposite myth is just as dangerous. Believing redundancy makes failure irrelevant. A detour works only if another road exists, and only if that road has room. Imagine 4 bridges carrying traffic into a city. Close one at midnight and the others barely notice. Close it at rush hour and every remaining bridge slows down. Now close a second. Cars do not disappear. They queue. Digital traffic behaves differently in detail, but the pressure is familiar. Packets wait, routes stretch, and services compete for capacity. Redundancy is not the number of lines drawn on a map. It is usable capacity on independent routes, available when something goes wrong. 2 cables landing in the same vulnerable place may look diverse and fail together. A backup already running near its limit is not much of a backup. Now make the problem harder. Break several cables in the same region. Or isolate an island connected by only 1 or 2 routes. The network still tries to heal itself, but the available detours become longer and smaller. This is where an invisible engineering event turns into a human one. At first, large networks shift traffic. Cloud platforms may move workloads. Operators prioritize critical links. Content stored nearby still loads because it never needs to cross the damaged route. A local news page can feel normal while an overseas payment, login, or business system becomes painfully slow. And that creates an uncomfortable question. When capacity shrinks, who gets through first? There is no single person controlling one global queue. Different networks make different decisions. But companies with more providers, better contracts, local copies, and multiple data centers usually have more ways around the damage than a small business, depending on one remote service. Prepared systems degrade gracefully. Video quality falls before the call fails. A store saves transactions locally and sends them later. A bank switches to a secondary route. Vulnerable systems simply wait, time out, or stop. The cable cut is shared. The consequences are not. This is why connectivity is not just about peak speed on a normal day. The important question is what remains on the worst day. How many independent routes exist? Where do they land? Who owns the spare capacity? And can a region reach essential services without sending every request across the same ocean? In March 2024, multiple submarine cable failures disrupted connectivity across West and Central Africa. 13 countries saw measurable impacts. This was not a movie-style moment when an entire continent blinked off. It was messier, different networks in different countries, losing different amounts of capacity at different times. Some operators rerouted traffic quickly. One major cable reportedly carried several times its usual load as networks searched for alternatives. In some places, traffic recovered within hours. Elsewhere, services remained degraded for days or weeks. The same physical event produced many versions of the internet. That is the real lesson. A cable map can show connections, but it cannot show resilience by itself. You also need capacity, agreements, equipment, local caches, power, and people ready to reroute traffic. The line on the map is only the visible skeleton. The ability to survive is hidden behind it, and the cause is usually less glamorous than the conspiracy theories. Around 3 or 4 submarine cable faults happen every week. Most are linked to ordinary human activity, especially fishing and anchors. The cloud, it turns out, has a surprisingly persistent anchor problem. Deliberate attacks matter, earthquakes happen, and deep-sea failures exist. But if we focus only on dramatic sabotage, we miss the everyday risk sitting close to shore. Busy ports, fishing grounds, unclear charts, weak coordination, and permits that can keep a repair ship waiting while users remain on crowded detours. So how do you repair a hair-thin path of light under kilometers of water? First, engineers estimate where the fault occurred by measuring how the signal changed. Then, a specialized cable ship sails toward that location, carrying spare cable, testing equipment, grapnels, and people trained to perform surgery on the seabed. In deep water, the crew may drag a hooked tool across the bottom to catch the cable. They lift one end to the ship, test it, seal it, and hold it. Then, they recover the other end. The damaged section is removed. New cable is spliced between the two sides, and every fiber is tested. The finished repair is longer than the original gap, so the ship cannot simply drop it straight down. The crew carefully lowers the joined cable in a loop, often called the final bite, and places it back on the seabed. Near shore, burial equipment may protect it again beneath sand or sediment. In favorable conditions, a repair can take roughly 1 to 3 weeks, but weather, depth, distance, ship availability, customs, permits, and political restrictions can stretch that timeline. The fiber may be ready, the paperwork may not be. A global network can be delayed by one harbor and one unsigned document. The repair itself can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. The wider economic damage can be much larger because the expensive part is not the glass. It is everything waiting behind it. Missed trades, failed checkouts, idle workers, delayed shipments, and engineers spending the night persuading traffic to use the long way around. At this point, the obvious solution seems to be space. If ships can cut cables, why not move the internet to satellites? Satellites are valuable. They connect remote places, restore basic service after disasters, and provide routes where laying fiber makes no sense. But they are not a simple replacement for the ocean network. International fiber carries extraordinary capacity at very low cost per bit. One modern cable can move hundreds of terabits per second. Replacing that volume with satellites would require far more equipment, spectrum, ground stations, and money. Space is an excellent emergency lane. It is not a spare ocean hiding above our heads. The useful question is not cable or satellite. It is what combination keeps essential communication alive. A hospital may need a narrow emergency link, not unlimited video. An island may use satellite capacity while a repair ship travels. Resilience comes from layers designed for different jobs, not one miracle technology promised for every problem. There is one more change beneath the water. For decades, telecommunications companies built most international cables together. Now the largest cloud and technology companies finance a growing share of new capacity. They have a powerful reason. Owning a route can reduce costs, improve performance, and give their data centers more control over how traffic moves. Is that good or bad? It can add enormous capacity and new paths. It can also concentrate decisions about critical infrastructure inside a small group of private companies. The question is not whether private investment belongs underwater. It is whether countries understand the routes they depend on and plan for failures beyond any single company. New cables are expensive, but the price of not building diverse routes can stay hidden for years. On normal days, one efficient path looks sufficient. On the day it fails, spare capacity suddenly becomes the product everyone wishes they had purchased. Resilience feels wasteful right up until the moment it becomes essential. For governments, networks, and businesses, the practical rule is simple. Diversity before headline speed. Independent landings matter. Multiple providers matter. Local copies matter. Repair agreements matter. A faster connection is useful every day. A second route becomes priceless on the one day the first route disappears. Eventually, the repaired fibers pass their tests. Light crosses the damaged section again, but the internet does not snap back like a lamp. Operators restore routes carefully. Traffic shifts away from temporary detours. Systems check connections, replay queued work, synchronize copies, and investigate errors created while capacity was limited. Some users recover immediately. Others keep seeing slow service because their provider has not restored the same path. A payment marked pending may still need reconciliation. A backup job may compete with live traffic. A business can be online while its systems are still cleaning up the outage. This matters because recovery statistics can hide people. A national traffic graph may look normal, while one region, one provider, or one service remains degraded. The internet is back is often true at the top of the chart before it is true on every phone. Afterward, engineers study the logs. They ask which routes filled first, which services failed badly, which backups actually worked, and why repairs took as long as they did. Then the expensive decisions begin. Add capacity, move a landing, bury a vulnerable section, negotiate another provider, or accept the same risk again. So send that message again. It leaves your hand, crosses a city, enters the ocean, and races through glass in the dark. You never see the cable, the detours, the repair ships, or the people watching the light. That invisibility is the system working. But the cloud was never weightless. It has landing stations, owners, bottlenecks, and an anchor problem. If this changed the way you see the internet, subscribe to Priced In, leave a like, and turn on the bell. There are more hidden systems beneath everyday life, and we'll uncover the next one together.